The Whispering Wight of Winslow. England, February 2000. Winslow, a small village nestled in the misty countryside of Buckinghamshire, is known for its ancient history, stone churches, and quaint cobblestone streets. But beneath the village's calm surface lurks a dark secret, a secret that has been festering for centuries. In February of the year 2000, as a freezing fog rolled in from the Chiltern Hills, the village would witness a horror that had not been seen in generations. Part 1, The Recovered Diary. It began with a discovery. Lizzie Holloway, a local historian, had been researching the village's past, combing through the basement archives of the Winslow Historical Society. The damp cellar was filled with dust-covered tomes, old maps, and brittle documents. Among the collection, she found a small, weathered diary bound in cracked black leather, its pages stained with age. The diary belonged to a woman named Eliza Merton, dated 1762. Curious, Lizzie brought the diary back to her small, isolated cottage at the edge of the village. That night, by the dim light of a single flickering candle, she began to read. The entries started innocuously enough, describing daily life in 18th century Winslow, until they didn't. Eliza Merton was accused of witchcraft. Her diary detailed strange occurrences that had befallen the village. Livestock found dead, children falling ill, and husbands disappearing without a trace. The villagers blamed Eliza, believing her to be a witch who had made a pact with dark forces. On a cold February night in 1762, they dragged her from her home, beat her, and bound her to a wooden stake in the village square. Her final entry, written in shaky script, was a curse. "I shall return when justice is denied. I shall whisper in the ears of the wicked." Lizzie felt a shiver run down her spine. The room seemed colder, and she heard a faint whisper like a breath of wind. She dismissed it as her imagination, until the whisper grew louder. Part 2, The Possession. The next morning, Lizzie was found wandering the village in a daze, her eyes glassy and her face pale. She muttered to herself words no one could understand. She spoke in a voice that wasn't her own, an old, rasping voice, filled with hatred and malice. The villagers, unaware of the diary's contents, chalked it up to exhaustion, or perhaps the flu. But something was wrong with Lizzie. Her body convulsed and her movements became erratic. Her friends tried to speak with her, but she would only laugh in a deep, unnatural tone. As days went on, she began to speak of the past, recounting details of old Winslow history that no one alive could possibly know. She would shout the names of the men who condemned Eliza, names etched on tombstones that had long since crumbled into dust. Her whispers spread like a plague. The butcher, James Partridge, woke in the middle of the night to find his wife, Mary, standing at the foot of their bed, whispering in that same voice, "Guilty. All. Guilty." His heart raced as he tried to wake her. But when her eyes opened, they were not Mary's. They were cold, milky white, like a corpse's. She lunged at him with a strength that wasn't hers, her fingers clawing at his throat. Mary had no recollection of the attack in the morning, nor did she remember what happened when she disappeared into the woods the following night, her feet bloody from walking barefoot on the frozen ground. James heard her voice through the thick fog, whispering the same words. And then others began hearing the whispers too. Part 3, The Reverse Revenge. Lizzie's possessions spread like a malignant force. The whispers carried Eliza Merton's curse, seeking retribution for what had been done to her over 2 centuries ago. The dead woman's spirit demanded justice, but it wasn't just the descendants of those who condemned her that were targeted. She had set her sights on those who would ignore injustice and cruelty, on those who would silently stand by as the innocent suffered. One by one, villagers found themselves taken over, acting out in strange and terrifying ways. A teenage boy, Timmy Coleridge, was found in the church, painting the walls with blood he had drawn from his own arms, muttering about sins of silence. The vicar, Father Douglas, was discovered screaming from the bell tower that he could hear the cries of the damned. It became clear that the entire village was at risk, past and present colliding in a horrific blend of vengeance and madness. The whispers grew louder each day, carrying through the fog and winding streets. People barricaded themselves indoors, but the whispers penetrated walls, slipping through keyholes and creeping into their minds like a parasite. It was then that the villagers realized They had to undo the wrong that had been done to Eliza Merton. They had to atone, not just for the sins of their forefathers, but for their own cowardice and ignorance. Part 4. The Exorcism and the Consequence. A meeting was held in the village square, the very place where Eliza was burned. The villagers, led by Father Douglas, decided to perform an exorcism, a desperate attempt to cleanse the village of the malignant force. Lizzie Holloway, still in her possessed state, was bound to a chair at the center of the square. She laughed and spat at them, her voice switching between Lizzie's and the rasping whispers of Eliza. As the ceremony began, the fog thickened and the air grew colder. The villagers chanted, holding hands and reciting prayers. Lizzie screamed and her body convulsed violently. The whispers grew into a cacophony, a choir of tormented voices echoing through the streets. It was as if the entire village was enveloped in a chorus of the damned. And then, silence. The fog lifted and Lizzie collapsed, unconscious. The villagers breathed a sigh of relief, believing they had purged the spirit. But as they turned to leave, they heard a single whisper, soft yet unmistakable, "I shall return." That night, the village elders who had orchestrated the exorcism disappeared. Their homes were found empty, doors ajar, with signs of a struggle. On the floor of the square where Lizzie had been bound were fresh scorch marks, and around them, scrawled in charcoal, were the words, "Justice is eternal." Epilogue, the endless whisper. To this day, Winslow remains a quiet village, but its inhabitants live in fear. They speak of a curse that cannot be undone, a spirit that does not rest, and whispers that can still be heard on cold, foggy nights. Those who walk the streets of Winslow are careful not to speak of the past. But every now and then, when the wind is just right and the moon is full, a lone villager will hear it, a faint, echoing whisper in their ear. Guilty, all guilty, and they know the whispering Wight of Winslow has not forgotten.